so we don't. Good afternoon, everybody. Hi, my name is Mark Smith. I'm the chairperson of the Mayor's Commission for Citizens with Disabilities. I want to welcome our television audience, um, our guests, our interpreter, and members of the commission. I do want to inform you, and I'm very pleased to inform you that this will be rebroadcast on Channel 18 on 7 p.m. on Tuesday nights on Cox. It's also can be viewed on the Dotcomm YouTube channel of the cities, which can be found on the mayor's office. There's archived videos of our meetings, and this meeting and other meetings can be seen at the Disability Commission's website at www.cityofomaha.org. Click on the Mayor's Commission, and then click on the Disabilities Commission. I want to do a reminder of why we're here, and this book is not cooperating. The objective of our commission is to promote quality of life, accessibility, equity in all aspects related to the city of Omaha on behalf of those and in cooperation with those citizens who experience disabilities and their families. To this end, we advise the mayor, the city council, city department heads, and other personnel on issues of access, representation, employment, housing, quality of life as it affects citizens with disabilities and their respective families. We attempt to and try and work to serve as a resource for Omaha citizens with disabilities and their families to bring concerns forward and find resolution regarding issues that affect them. I can say that in our pre-meeting, we had a discussion about a situation that we're going to be working on probably in the next month or so. So we're putting our money where our mouth is, so to speak. We try and publicize the role of the Mayor's Commission to people with disabilities in the city and to assist employers, housing representatives, business owners, engineers, architects, and others who have a role in bettering the life of Omaha citizens. We work to promote awareness of the general public on the capabilities, needs, and desires of people with disabilities. We work to publicly recognize the effort of employers, businesses, schools, organizations, and others who've demonstrated outstanding support in their programs and services for citizens with disabilities. We work to advocate for accessibility and implement plans and projects to improve services for people with disabilities in Omaha, and we review and implement plans and projects for advocating for people with disabilities in the city. I'll switch back to the other page. I want to inform you it might be a good idea to have a paper and pen handy to take notes at the end because we'll be having some announcements. Given that we're near the holiday season, I don't know if folks have lots of plans for their respective organizations, or they might have some really cool plans and you'll want to take note of that. So what we'll do now is do a quick member introduction for the folks that are, all of our members are here virtually, but can report out in terms of who they are, who they are here, and who they're here to represent. And I'll start. Again, I'm Mark Smith. I'm a faculty at the University of Nebraska Medical Center. I work at the Monroe-Meyer Institute, which is the University Center for Excellence in Developmental and Intellectual Disabilities for the state of Nebraska. And I'm here representing people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. I should add as well that I'm the parent of and also a sibling to adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So I'm here as a family member as well. How about Nancy?
I'm Nancy Floro, and I work with the Nebraska Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired, and we serve individuals that are visually impaired, blind, and deafblind.
Thanks, Nancy. Megan?
Megan Walls with Assistology. I do consulting and training around inclusion, accessibility, and universal design in our community. And I work across the lifespan and across disability categories. So I'm here representing interests of the greater disability community.
Thanks, Megan. Jennifer?
Hi, I'm Jen Pollock, and I facilitate elementary special education services for Millard Public Schools. So I'm representing our youth with disabilities.
Thanks, Jen. Laura?
I'm Laura Young. I work at the League of Human Dignity, and I represent individuals that are currently receiving AD waiver and any individual that has a disability that really wants to remain in their own home. So we do those services as well.
Thanks, Laura. I should remark that if you want to know more about the aged and disabled Medicaid waiver, Laura is a great resource. So there you go. And Stephanie?
Hi, I'm Stephanie Scabdahl. I work with Outlook Nebraska. We provide employment and enrichment opportunities for those who are blind and visually impaired, and I am here representing that population.
Thanks, Steph. And Rachel?
Hello, I'm Rachel. I've worked with individuals with traumatic brain injuries and spinal cord injuries. I currently work for the state of Nebraska with individuals with developmental disabilities. So if you're wanting to learn about the developmental disability waivers, I'm your girl for that. Good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Rachel.
Eric is also on.
Okay, I'm sorry?
Eric is also on.
Is Eric on? Did I miss Eric?
Yes, Eric is here.
Oh, Eric, I
Hi, everybody.
apologize. Eric, go ahead, please.
Oh, my name's Eric Olson. I'm just somebody who suffered with a spinal cord injury and here representing that community.
And glad you're here, Eric. I apologize. It's a little hard to see on the screen, like, who's here. I think you must have, like, snuck in the back door, perhaps. Or
I did sneak in a little bit behind.
Yeah, no problem. I do want to announce that we had a pre-meeting, but that we did not have a quorum because I'm the only person who's physically present that's a member of the commission. So we did not have an agenda approval or minutes approval. But given the pandemic and the fact that we've been meeting primarily virtually for most of the year, we're just making the best of the circumstances, as I think all of the commissions and boards and councils that serve the city are trying to do. Given that, but we had a very good preliminary session discussion. Next month, we'll be looking at doing our planning for our 2021 spate of presentations and other activities that we'll be doing in keeping with the objectives, the mission, and activities of the Commission for Citizens with Disabilities. Given that, I'd like to introduce the speaker that we have lined up today. The last 2 months of this year, we had kind of set aside for a discussion on housing. And if you had the chance to see our presentation last month, we had Joe Garcia, who came in and talked about tenant rights and the ability to get support for people with disabilities to ensure that their rights were met, and as far as where they lived and so forth. I'm very pleased to say that this month we're going to be hearing from Linda Toomey, who is the executive director of the Sienna Francis House. And before you start, Linda, I just want to say I was having one of those moments last night because there was a really nice story on the news about Sienna Francis and housing and some of the work that you were doing. And I was like, we're going to talk about that tomorrow. So anyway, we're really pleased Linda is here, and I think she'll have a lot to share.
All right, I'm going to take my mask off for the presentation. Is that okay with everybody in the room? Or would you like me to remain masked?
It's okay with me.
Okay with me.
Okay.
Okay, we've got,
I just-
it's unanimous.
Thinks it makes the vocal quality a little bit better.
Sure.
Thank you for having me here today. I think this is an issue that many of us work on, and I would like just to add a few things about myself. One is I am going to mainly talk about serving adults with disabilities and primarily from the mental health aspect. I'm a licensed clinical social worker by training, and the past 20 years of my career have really been in mental health or housing. So I have been working with groups for the last 10 years or more who've developed some affordable housing in Nebraska. I've been involved with the development of probably about 250 affordable housing units. I also am the mother of a young adult who has an intellectual and disability. She has Down syndrome. So we are going to talk about disability today from a very, very wide range. Just know that my work is generally for adults with mental illness. So you may think the Sienna Francis House is a strange partner to talk about affordable housing, but affordable housing is a key to those that we serve. So today, I'm really looking forward to this discussion that we might have about affordable housing. So I'm going to walk through some components about affordable housing, some facts about the people who need affordable housing, and maybe some good projects that are working in our community for affordable housing, which primarily supports individuals with disabilities. So a little bit first about Sienna Francis House. Most people think of us, do I have this in the wrong mode? Okay, I'm gonna go back to the beginning. Sorry, I'm not very techie sometimes. Most people think of us about it as an emergency shelter, and we certainly are an emergency shelter. Our mission at Sienna Francis House is to welcome, shelter, and empower individuals experiencing homelessness to navigate their path to housing. So we have been doing emergency shelter, which sometimes we call crisis housing, for 45 years this year. That mission started with women in downtown Omaha in an old building, which was expanded to men in a building a few blocks away. And then in 1994, we moved to our current campus at 17th and Nicholas Street. We provide meals to those who receive services from us and those in the community. Prior to the to the COVID pandemic, we had individuals who are not homeless who would come in and have a nutritious meal at our site. We've adjusted that. We still provide meals to those individuals. They just can't come in right now. We do that through kind of a to-go process. One of our programs at Sienna Francis House is a program called Miracles. It is a chemical addiction program for those who suffer from substance abuse. It is a residential program in which individuals are there for about 9 months and work a 12-step model. It's interesting as we talk about disability. I was on a national training call last week, and they were talking about the issue of substance abuse and it being a disability. And they made a clarification about substance abuse around disability, and that is, it is only a disability when someone is not using. So when we look at those needs and what Sienna Francis House does, we're considered to be a low barrier shelter, meaning we take people regardless of their mental health, regardless of their sobriety status and things like that. So people who have an addiction, according to the disability laws, would not be considered to have that disability unless they're in recovery. The last thing that I'm going to talk about, because I don't want to kill people with words in this PowerPoint, is that we have 48 apartments on our campus that are solely dedicated to serving individuals with disability. Those individuals in those apartments are people who have a primary, mostly of a mental health disability. They also have physical disabilities, but they also were chronic homeless before they entered into our apartments. We've had those apartments since 2012. And we are working on more housing units for individuals who are disabled, and we'll talk more about that throughout the presentation, or really at the end of the presentation. So that's a little bit about Sienna Francis House, again, and what we do, and that we have been in this affordable housing arena. So a little bit more about us is, overall, we serve about 3,000 individuals annually. 29% of those individuals have a physical disability. 6% have a developmental disability. Sorry, I had a pop up on the computer. Sorry about that. Most of the individuals with developmental disability or individuals who are aging out of foster care or the system, they generally are individuals who are less than 30 years old. It isn't a high percentage of individuals that we serve, but we do provide services to them. Our most prevalent disability is mental health issue at almost 50%, alcohol abuse at 10%, drug abuse at 13%, and both alcohol and drug abuse at 20%, and having a chronic health condition, 11% report that. This data is all based on self-report. It is not based on clinician or doctor diagnosis. It is what people tell us at intake. So probably these disability numbers are smaller than they're a little bit smaller than what is actual, because people tend to underreport disabilities. When we talk about affordable housing today, we really want to have a conversation that's inclusive. There's lots of different disability groups. The commission, during introductions, talked about the various sectors or target populations that they represent. So we have some shared goals for housing, regardless if you're an adult with a disability, a young person entering housing with an intellectual disability. We want there to be choice in housing. That's a fundamental belief. We want housing to be individualized. So we know that one housing model or one housing plan will not fit all. I'm a big believer in continuums. We need lots of different opportunities for continuums for housing. So individuals, safe and appropriate. Everybody wants to live in a neighborhood that's safe, wants to have appropriate housing where everything is working, and that it follows the 30% income rule, that people are not overpaying for housing, which we will get into more as we talk about affordability. And the last one is that there's a focus on community integration, that no matter what type of housing someone has, that they're part of that community, they have opportunities to worship, to grocery shop, to enjoy the parks, and the perks of being in a community. So those are some of our shared goals about housing, whether it's from the Santa Francis House or any of the organizations that are part of the commission. A little bit about data that might set the stage for our discussion about affordable housing, and that is many people who have a disability have no income because they've not been awarded SSI or have any income related to their disability, or if they do have SSI, their annual income is under $10,000 a year. So when we look at affordability in housing, Nebraska has the 47th highest rents in the country out of 56 states and territories. That puts them like in the 85th percentile for kind of lack of affordability. In the Omaha metro area in 2019, fair market rent of a studio is $623. For a one bedroom, that's $744. I focused particularly on those two housing types for two reasons. Most of the individuals we serve that experience homelessness at Santa Francis House are single individuals. And I think most of the time when we talk about people with disabilities, we're talking about housing for single individuals. Now, I will say the data about Omaha's affordability of housing is not good. However, we are somewhat lucky because there are many housing markets in the country where fair market rent exceeds the SSI amount. So although we don't exceed it, we are under it. You still, if you make $783 a month, which is the SSI value right now, cannot afford a studio at $623 and transportation and groceries and all the things that you need to be an independent member in the community. The other data that I kind of think is important as we set the stage is about 1 in 3 households using a Section 8 voucher are headed by a non-elderly, under age 62 person with a disability. That information comes from the National Housing Trust Fund. So this is going to lead into a discussion a little bit about the different types of housing, but when we look at what's available for affordable housing, often Section 8 or public housing are two of the largest resources that people talk about. So when we look at that, 33% of people with Section 8 vouchers are younger than 62 with a disability. So why are we all here talking today? It's because we have a housing crisis. So most people know that affordable housing is diminishing in some parts of the United States. Since 1980, the number of affordable housing units nationally has declined. So these are some headlines that I think really talk about the affordable housing crisis. The affordable housing crisis explained. Blame it on policy, demographics, and market forces. So we've looked at very much from a high level some of the market forces in Omaha, and it's affecting Americans across the income spectrum. The National Low Income Housing Coalition found in 2018 that a renter working 40 hours a week and earning a minimum wage can afford a typical 2-bedroom apartment in exactly 0 counties nationwide. So that's a pretty big impact on housing when we look at affordable housing for people with disabilities and without disabilities. You have to be working a 40-hour job earning minimum wage, and you can't afford any housing anywhere. So the type of affordable housing available, particularly as we talk about people with disabilities, is living with parents or family members. That's been a very traditional one. Public housing, of applying and living in a public housing project or tower, as they're often referred. Section 8 housing, which is also a type of public housing, but it's considered scattered site, where you have a voucher and you can find a place to rent with that voucher. That voucher pays for a percentage of your rent. In Section 8, or in public housing, also the 30% rule applies, that you pay 30% of your income towards rent. The great thing about Section 8 housing is it offers individuals choice. The limit of Section 8 voucher or voucher housing is often it's hard to find landlords who will rent to Section 8. When you have tight housing markets and difficulties and a lot of competition, landlords will bypass the Section 8 process. One is lower rents. Fair market rent is lower than kind of average market rent. In Omaha, that's probably between $50 and $100 per unit per month. The second thing is there's processes with Section 8 housing. The people who are getting Section 8 housing and public housing often have criminal backgrounds that maybe some individuals don't want to rent to. They often have bad credit, which is another obstacle for rent. So both Section 8 and public housing, they have they serve a purpose in helping some individuals who can't find housing elsewhere. Section 811, which is supportive housing for individuals with disabilities, which is also supported by HUD. It's where we often find people with intellectual childhood disabilities receive housing there. Group homes and supportive housing are another example, 24/7 staff living in congregate facilities. If anything, the COVID pandemic has highlighted is some of the challenges with keeping at-risk individuals, particularly individuals, safe who are in congregate housing. Assisted living is sometimes a housing type available. Skilled nursing for people who have higher level needs and need nursing support. And then the last one is some people, it's very few and far between, are fortunate enough to have special needs trusts where they might have home ownership or rent payments that are paid out of these vehicles. It opens up a lot more housing to them. But that's a very small percentage of people, but it is a type of housing out there. So when we talk about the various types, and in Omaha, I think all of these types of housing are available. They are not available to a point where people can access them. So the next slide is a study that's being done on housing in the Omaha area. It certainly encompasses a lot more than affordability and people with disabilities, but it's very, very important because when we look at the type of housing that individuals need, it has to be affordable with disabilities. And this slide tells us that today, 98,500 people qualify for affordable housing in our community, but there are fewer than 20,000 units available. So that puts a gap of almost 79,000 units of affordable housing available. That's not even the worst kind of news from this data about the Omaha metro area. The worst news is that gap is going to widen. If things remain constant between now and 2040, there will be a gap of 104,000 units for affordability. So the metro area's data, the look at future forward says in 2040 that almost 130,000 families will qualify for individuals and families. We often talk about families, just head of household, will qualify for affordable housing. And we just will not have that housing available if something doesn't change, which is, I think, why we're all coming together to talk about this topic. So with that, I want to talk about some of the things that are being done in the community in regards to affordable housing. This need has long existed for individuals who are homeless with a disability. So in 2012, the Siena Francis House opened the Siena Francis Apartments. These are 48 units in 2 buildings that are located on our campus. They are single room occupancy. And I want to point that out because we're going to talk about a couple of different projects today. These apartments do not have kitchens in them. They have kind of a modified kitchen. It has a sink, a microwave, and a dorm fridge per se. So these are not apartments where people can cook and kind of be fully self-sufficient. So they were designed for individuals who'd been chronically homeless, who have a lot of mental health needs. So they received their meals from our commercial kitchen on campus that supports our other programs. We also have co-located supports for the individuals who live in these apartments, which makes them what we like to refer to as permanent supportive housing. So the supports are that everyone has a case manager. Everyone is not required to participate in case management or have a treatment plan or an individual service plan. In the world of disabilities, there's several terms that describe that piece. So besides the case manager, we also have the substance abuse services on campus, computers, other professionals that can lean in and help individuals. So rent is calculated at 30% of the income. This was a tax credit project, meaning it was built with tax credits, but the rental assistance comes from general assistance vouchers and project-based Section 8. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about that. We kind of consider project-based Section 8 to be a great resource when you're thinking about affordable housing for people because it guarantees the rents. But the general assistance is a general assistance voucher that people who are awaiting disability and applying for a disability receive. So in addition to being able to go out and rent an apartment or a unit, they also get a $30 voucher each month for the dollar store to meet the needs that maybe the SNAP program, food stamps program does not meet. So our goal with these apartments is housing stability. So having a disability and being homeless, particularly chronic homeless, you have not had housing for a long time. So the gold standard for these units is people staying there longer. The average length of stay for tenants for our project here is about 3 years. So it's remained about 3 years. Some people leave and graduate out of this type of housing and no longer need the service, which we consider is the greatest thing on earth if you're disabled and you no longer need co-located supports, which we think we often talk in the world of homelessness and the housing work that we do as being the most intensive services. So we think graduation's a great thing. Some people get evicted. Even with the right supports and things like that, people may choose not to pay rent. They may choose not to follow the rules of tenancy. Last month you had fair housing here, so I think you talked a lot about those rules. So some people get evicted and some people just leave. It's not uncommon for people with disabilities who've been formerly homeless to just abandon a unit. But our goal is housing stability. So what we're trying to do there is wraparound services for them in which they're paying their rent, they can keep the unit, they're keeping maybe benefits and entitlements in place that help them to keep that unit and to achieve their goals, and that they also have any supports they want. A couple of other unique things about these apartments are we provide transportation as an agency. When we talk about people with disabilities who need affordable housing, there's lots and lots of challenges or barriers depending how you look at it, and transportation is one of them, as having access to transportation, suitable transportation. So for us, we provide transportation to the individuals who are these units, to medical care, to important appointments. The other thing is that these units have a co-located community room in each of them, so people can get together with their neighbors outside their apartment and have space to do that. It also allows us to have activities for them, which are important for individuals with disabilities. And laundry is free to the residents. When we look at the ways that we try to minimize someone losing their affordable housing, is we want to make sure that they have the income to get their basic needs stuff done. So laundry is free in these units, and utilities are also included as part of the rent. So it ensures that, hey, if I can't pay my rent, it isn't that I can't pay my rent, I can't pay my utilities, or I got my water shut off or my electricity shut off, now I'm going to lose my housing. That's also included as a central component of our apartments. The next one that I want to feature is actually Victory Apartments. This is a Burlington capital project, which I should have probably put that in the slides. Victory Apartments opened in 2013 at 819 Dorcas Street. It opened with 90 apartments for veterans. All the veterans living in those 90 apartments are disabled. And this is a Section 8 project-based unit. They just added 60 more units just a few months ago here due to the need in the community and the success of this project. So the first 90 units are project-based with the Douglas County Housing Authority, and the second the second 60 units are project-based with the Omaha Housing Authority, and then the VA has a project with HUD that they call HUD-VASH, that some of those units are HUD-VASH supported. So another essential component of this project, and I worked on the development of this project when I was at the Department of Veterans Affairs with Burlington Capital, is that they have co-located primary care. When we talk about housing for people with disabilities, we often talk about the overlap between the health component and the needs. So this has a co-located primary care clinic in the project. It also had case management, transportation assistance, laundry. Some of the other things that we talked about that are in the Sienna Francis House project are also happening in Victory Apartments. The community space. In each of these projects for individuals with disabilities, I'm a big advocate for the community space, area where people can get together, be with their neighbors, have coffee, socialize, those events. It's highly needed. It doesn't replace the ability to go out and go to church in your community or to be involved with other places, but it makes it very accessible. And then the last project that I want to talk about is one that we're currently working on at Sienna Francis House, and we're calling this project the Cottages. The Cottages will be located, if everything is approved, we're in the development processes with city planning and city council. So this is really a project that's in development right now. So they would be located at 16th and Charles Street and would go up to Clark Street. Between 16th and 17th. This is outside of the Sienna Francis House's campus, but pretty adjacent to us. We think that's really important because as we provide housing to people with disabilities, there's a lot of efficiencies that we get out of our campus. But this is a unique project. It's the first kind of tiny homes. We like to call it the Cottages. It sounds a little more dignified than tiny homes. Project in Nebraska. So what we're proposing here is 50 tiny homes. They will all be 300 square feet or less. This is a picture of kind of the layout. So if you're looking at the right-hand side of your screen, that is 16th and Charles Street on the south, which would be the south of the project. And if you're looking at the upper left, sorry, I don't have a pointer or anything, that would be Clark Street. So on the bottom right, you can kind of see a community building flanked in the trees there. That gray building is a house that is existing in the neighborhood. The owners are not interested in selling the house. So right now we're planning the development around the house. So if you want to know what that gray building is, it's actually a house. On the east side of the community building would be parking and trash receptacles and things like that. And then the rest of it is clusters of cottages. So each cluster is meant to be kind of a smaller community, privacy, and it's meant to be a walking community. So I'm going to go to the next screen. So we're working on this now. We hope to get city council and city planning approval in first quarter of 2021. This is a tax credit project, as most of affordable housing is. And if you've been talking about affordable housing as a group, you've probably talked about there's not enough tax credits in the state to support the affordable housing needs that we have. So when we look at that gap, affordable housing only grows at a couple hundred units a year statewide, maybe about 100 in the Omaha metro area, and the number of people who are in need is 79,000. So we all know that math just does not work out. So it's a tax credit project. We are hoping to get a tax credit award in early 2021, which would allow us, once we receive the city council and the city planning approvals, to go ahead with the development. This project is innovative in the way that the average cost for developing an affordable unit under like normal standards for tax credits, which is apartment buildings, walls, units, is about $141,000 per unit. This will be developing developing the units at a cost much lower than that. We don't have the final budget. We're working through that with NIFA, but this will be a project that will have no debt at the end and possibly some reserves, because the cost of developing these are going to be much cheaper than the average of $141,000. 50 cottages, 300 square feet or less. I mentioned that before. 10% of these units will be accessible. What we mean by that is they will have the full accessibility of bathrooms, kitchen, things like that. That meets the standards for tax credits. Our apartments at Sienna Francis House, all of them were built to be accessible. So we have very large bathrooms and things like that. However, the standard is 10% of the units. Although they won't be accessible, many of these will be accessible to the disability, fully accessible, the population that we serve, in terms that they'll be slab on ground, no stairs, one level type of things. The community center, the same things that are important in our current apartments and that I mentioned in Victory Apartments will be in the project. Again, free laundry, computer access, covered storage for bikes or other things that people may not be able to fit their belongings in. But another component of this is it will be a gated, secure community. So I'm going to try to go back one slide. Again, techie me is not very lucky. So if you look at this, it kind of shows maybe the perimeter of a fence, particularly if you're looking at the bottom left, which would be running along 17th Street. You can see parking right out on what would be Charles Street. Charles Street would be a new street in here, and some individual stalls around 17th Street. This is intended to be a secure community to protect the individuals inside. So it will be gated. It's not meant to be inclusive, that people can never leave. It's just meant to be secure. When people develop new apartment buildings now, they all are secure. You have a code to get in, you have a key fob, things like that. And our people with disabilities deserve the same safety in their housing. So it's being developed with safety in mind. I wanted to leave some time for questions and answer, so I'm just going to put my contact information up there for the final slide, and we can email these to anyone and get the slides sent out. But I think we have about 10, 15 minutes for questions. So if anybody has any questions or comments or anything they'd like to discuss, we have time for that now.
Okay, let's open it up for questions, folks.
I was curious as to what brought you to that field that crosses between social work and working in housing. I just find that really interesting. I'm wanting to go into, well, I'm in the process of getting my MSW actually myself.
Well, I was a social worker primarily working in mental health, and I happened to be at the Department of Veterans Affairs in 2008 when they made a large commitment to ending veteran homelessness. And I think this is a great discussion for this group because the VA has reduced veterans homelessness dramatically. I almost want to say 50% or more. And partly is that has been the investment nationally in this HUD-VASH program, which serves veterans with disabilities. It gives them Section 8 vouchers and things like that. That's been widely the success of that program. But at the time, we knew we needed more housing. We also knew we needed various types of housing. So we were used to doing transitional housing. Go somewhere, get services, supports, graduate, and then you would kind of hope you make it, right? That was the primary type of housing and homelessness besides emergency shelter. And the national data, the national studies just were not supporting that to be effective. So what was found to be more effective is housing with supports, individual apartments, apartment complexes, things like that. So we started to talk to some national experts, and this was back in 2008 and 2009, and what is leading to better outcomes for people with disabilities, and that was housing with supports, and that those supports are not cookie cutter supports, that those supports are not one applies all, that they are really individualized. So being a social worker and doing a lot of assessment and treatment planning and things like that over the years, it kind of became a really good fit because we needed the resource for people to get back into housing and to be stable. We also needed to make plans individualized. So that's kind of how I got into it. And for 10 years, it's been fascinating to be involved in these projects. They're very complex. The funding that's needed for them, tax credits, often TIF, tax increment financing from the city, sometimes federal home loans. The other interesting thing about affordable housing is most affordable housing is done by for-profit developers. So we spend a lot of time talking about nonprofit capacity and building nonprofit capacity to do affordable housing. So nationally, one of the nonprofits that I can think about, particularly in the homeless space, is Volunteers of America. They have their own affordable housing arm in which they're developing affordable housing from a nonprofit, which helps keep that money back for services. I mentioned with the cottages, we're hoping to have a reserve in the end. We haven't figured out necessarily yet who's going to pay the rents, which is an important part of that project being successful long term. And we know what the services will cost and kind of what that model looks like. But we think there's a lot more space for nonprofits to come forward and work in development and do the development and to get skills around this, because the money that's not spent in the development phase can then be spent in the ongoing maintenance and future and services phase. So that's how I got into it. It's typically not a very typical path for a social worker.
Thank you for sharing.
This is Megan. I have a question. When you were talking about one of the goals around community integration and having resources and aspects of the community around the housing that are meaningful for people's lives and well-being in the community. Do you have any currently or planned key partners that Siena Francis House is partnering with to try to enhance those opportunities in the community?
Yeah, so we do have some people that we partner with. One is Community Alliance. They help and come in and provide some more wraparound services to people with serious, persistent mental illness that live in our apartments. We also have some other mainstream benefits where people provide transportation. We have some agencies that help with food and kind of food pantries and things like that. Although we provide meals, what we have found is once someone's stable in their housing, they want to cook for themselves. They want to have more autonomy and choice and things like that. So we also have some providers that we partner with around food and kind of food pantries. Now, it's interesting because when you say community integration, I often joke that if we're really focusing on the community integration that our clients want, particularly primarily when we look at homeless individuals, we serve more males than females. So this is an example that I'll use. When people say, we say, what do you want? And that's often before they're in housing, is I want an apartment and a girlfriend. So people want meaningful relationships. They want people who are going to support them and things like that. So my response as a licensed clinical social worker would often be, the apartment thing's kind of easy for us. The girlfriend's a little bit harder. We can set goals around how you might do that, ways that you can socialize, find social supports, how to ask somebody out, how to be back in the dating game if you haven't done that and you've had a disability or your anxiety gets in the way. But I think when we really look at community integration, if we're honest with ourselves and if we're really listening to our clients, often they'll say is, I want housing and I want relationships. And we have found some of those relationship pieces to be a little bit of a struggle, right? You get into a housing project, particularly one with supports, and you aren't going out and joining a church or joining a community group and things like that. So I will say that that has been a struggle, particularly when I was involved with Victory Apartments. We thought, oh, this is an older neighborhood. It was a rehab of an old building, lots of churches, walking, just pretty neighborhood. We found very few people went out and got involved. They didn't go to church. They didn't do those things. So we were strategizing on transportation to the grocery store and things like that because, not having great food, grocery store accessibility in that neighborhood was a challenge. So again, I think if we're going back to what our clients want is they want independence and relationships.
Great, thank you.
Others? Well, one thing
I'm just really curious.
Oh, go ahead, Rachel.
Is there or will there soon be a specific floor plan for the cottages?
Yes. If you would email me, I can email that to you. We have a couple different floor plans. We want it to look like a community and not necessarily a cookie cutter neighborhood. So we have a couple of different floor plans. I didn't know how much time we would have today and what people's interest would be in that, but I can definitely send that out to you. If people are interested, there are 3 different floor plans in the development.
Yeah, the thing that I was gonna, as we had talked about earlier, Linda, you had talked about the importance of services coordination and having somebody who's able to kind of support the individual housing. This is a 2-parter. That's the first part, but the second part is, what would you see the role of the commission? I'm sensing you saying we need to really do something because we're behind now, and we're looking at a worsening trend. And so, if on your wish list you said the Commission for Citizens with Disabilities could always, what would that be?
Yeah. So I think from the commission standpoint, particularly someone who's been involved in the development of these, is we may possibly be looking at things from one disability lens at a time. Mm-hmm. I say that because the disability lens that I primarily look through is mental illness. The disability for someone who's blind or has low vision, they have different needs maybe in units than necessarily that we develop for. We have the 10% accessibility piece. In 10 or 15 years now, will that look the same for our community? I think those are places that the commission can help with. I'm going to expand on that a little bit more. When I was at the VA, one of the things that we were looking at is 10 and 15 years out, veterans were experiencing severe disabilities in which they were not able to perform their activities of daily living or their independent activities of daily living at a very young age. So if we see that trend kind of coming in the general disability world, maybe we need to start thinking differently about how we build structures that are going to be around for 15, 20, or 30 years. So I think more eyes, more inclusivity in the project development and kind of thinking about things from other lenses. That's one of the things I think the commission can help with. It's very interesting that last month Fair Housing was here, because one of the things that we spend a fair amount of time doing is not with the people in our apartments, is talking to people who are in the community who are maybe being evicted because of their disability, or they feel their leases are not being renewed because of their disability. We've seen that as maybe a common thing with people with mental illness. It comes time to renew their lease, and their landlord's like, I don't want to renew your lease. Although they don't have to, and they don't really sometimes have to disclose why, it might seem that the person who's really paranoid and thinks someone's getting into their fridge and things like that, and then their lease doesn't get renewed, is probably a coincidence more than it is anything else. So it may be, general education. I think more resources when we talk about, who do we work with. We have probably a couple dozen agencies who provide services on our campus, who we regularly call and coordinate with. Like, for example, the Department of Health and Human Services, prior to the pandemic, came to our site every Tuesday to support applications, SNAP benefits, all that kind of stuff. Now they come and they do that in the parking lot because of the pandemic. So we have a lot of partners, but I think, again, I don't think we ever can stop looking, because we all have a limit to what services that we can provide and resource limits. So that was the first part of the question, was about what can the commission do. What was the second, Mark?
The role of services coordination and how, if you feel, the degree that you feel that that's an important component of finding affordable housing.
I think the role of services coordination is probably one of the biggest things. Like, the affordability is one thing, but if you don't have the right services in place, housing will fail sooner or later. Although we have different lenses that we apply to our work with individuals with disabilities, I think we all start with an assessment. Most areas, like mental health, although one agency may have a different assessment, they're probably all have some pretty common tenets of that assessment. Same for individuals with disability. Oh, you're aging out. VR is going to become involved. We're going to talk about housing. What can you do by yourself? Things like that. I think that's the key point, is those assessments, really understanding the individual's needs, really wrapping those services around each individual. As a parent of a young person with a disability, my husband and I have decided her housing plan for the near future and maybe the long-term future is to stay with us. That's just what we feel is right. If it wasn't right, that individualized plan would be very, very important to her success. And because we don't want to do cookie cutter services, most people will stop services, get out, avoid services if they feel things are being applied to them that don't have value. So we really have to listen to the people that we're serving. What do they want? What's adding value to their life? And not be necessarily applying our judgments so much to say on what people need. I think that's a big piece of it, but that service coordination is so important. I know League of Human Dignity is here. Although we don't do a ton of work with them, we do find ourselves doing work with them. It's often people who are in the emergency shelter who need a waiver, maybe a higher level of care, and they're not kind of elderly yet and fall into that range of people 62 and older. So it takes really a lot of partners. The adage might be it takes a village, and it really does, with all the services that individuals with disabilities should have access to and deserve access to. I think that's the other thing that we're talking about is dignity. It's dignity to have housing. It's dignity to have healthcare and the right supports. And at the end of the day, we want to create an inclusive community where everybody has dignity.
Thank you. Well, I think we're winding down. It's getting close to that time. I want to thank Linda Toomey, the executive director of Sienna Francis House. Just on a personal aside, I see Sienna Francis House as one of the jewels of the city of Omaha in terms of serving people with exceptional needs. So thank you for the work
Thank
that
you.
you do, and please, and thank you for the very thought-provoking discussion that you brought to us. Um, I think you came as advertised. How about that? So thanks very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to also, this is Laura. I also want to thank you for your presentation. It always is eye-opening to me. And we have worked together on a couple emergency consumers and have been able to find them support they've needed because we both worked very hard and honestly really appreciate that.
Yeah, one of our common sayings is this work is not easy, and I think we're all in it together.
Right.
And I just want to thank you for the presentation, but I also want to say that I think that we all need to lend our voices to these statistics that you shared with us today. I mean, I knew that there was a housing crisis, but when you painted this picture, I think that this is, and where we are in Nebraska, I think it's something that we really need to echo, everything that we learned today.
Great, thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Uh, Greatly appreciated. We've got a couple of minutes. Do folks want to go around and see if there's any announcements or? Okay, Eric.
I'm sorry, Mark, I can barely hear you.
I was, I saw a thumbs up, so I thought you had an announcement. Sorry.
Oh, no, I was just saying thank you.
Okay, thanks. Others, any announcements?
This is Nancy. I don't have anything.
Thanks,
Just
Nancy.
to wish everyone a really wonderful holiday season.
Great.
And this is Laura. I'll echo what Nancy said. Everybody have a great holiday season. And honestly, may 2021 be a much better year as we, come into vaccines and hopefully not being able to be stuck in our places of employment or home.
Very good. Others?
This is Stephanie. Nothing from me. Just everyone have a great holiday.
Thanks, Steph. I got closer to the microphone for Eric, so hopefully you can hear me.
Yeah, same here, everyone.
Thanks, Rach.
Been an awesome year with you guys. Looking forward to next year as well. No announcements from me.
Thanks. Greatly appreciated.
Take care, everybody. Merry Christmas.
Same to you, Eric. I do have an announcement. This is Mark again. For the last 5 years, Monroe Meyer has collaborated with a family support group that's called Hispanic Little Angels, NRG Media, and One World Community Health Center to support children with disabilities and their families by providing a meal and gifts for the children. We have 61 families registered for the event. It's going to be a drive-through. I don't have a date for that, but it'll be available on the website unmc.edu/MMI. And we're needing more toys. And there is a drop-off if you're interested in donating. It's at PTI Nebraska at 1941 South 42nd Street in the Center Mall. And so just putting the word out that this has been it's been a really great opportunity every year to reach out to families with children with disabilities and support them. So, and it's a really cool event when we can all get together. We can't this year, but I wanted to put that out there. I wanted to thank our interpreter, our staff, the folks that helped us video this. Remember too that we're going to be on channel 18 at 7 p.m. on Tuesday evenings. We won't be having another presentation again until February, so we'll look forward to seeing you all then. Want to wish everybody a great holiday and a safe holiday, and a happy 2021. So thanks very much.
Thank you, everybody.